All right. We've got Chris Bradbury and Jordan Jackson, the Summer.fi team, co-founders, CEOs, yield aggregation, HyperEVM launch, big day today. Hypercore, HyperEVM, Hyperliquid is obviously dominating the perps landscape. Summer.fi is one of the biggest sleepers in neo finance, a category that just continues to grow. Guys, let's get the Summer.fi team up live. Continue this stream. Big day today. BitMine shareholder meeting is on. Will ETH pump is the question. Let's get him in.
Hey.
Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Welcome, guys. This today marks the launch of Summer.fi on HyperEVM. We've been big Hyperliquid fans for a long time. Obviously, they kind of kick-started the perp space again. Before we get into why you guys are so bullish on Hyperliquid and decided to launch here, could you just give us a background on yourselves and Summer.fi? It's your first time on the show. So tell us a little bit about how you guys arrived here with Summer.fi.
Chris.
Yeah, sure thing. So I mean, both myself and Jordan came from Maker, and so did the Summer.fi project. So we both in Maker from like 2018. I think Jordan actually maybe just before, right, end of 2017. But yeah, Summer.fi was originally the front end for the Maker multi-collateral DAI stablecoin project that launched in November 2019. That's when Summer.fi officially launched for the first time, originally under the name Oasis.app. And then when the foundation dissolved, Maker Foundation in 2021, it spun out into its own separate entity, and we've kind of expanded from then away from Maker into kind of the wider DeFi ecosystem, kind of on that journey then to beginning of last year, where we launched a Summer token and the latest Summer protocol, which takes us all the way then to today, launching on the HyperEVM, and continue to expand across the different various Ethereum chains.
Yeah, I mean, Chris,
Jordan,
Chris mainly started, but yeah, been in the Ethereum and DeFi ecosystem before it was even DeFi really, and yeah, have seen basically all the things come and go in DeFi, and yeah, just really super excited around basically the yield ecosystem, I'd say, within the Ethereum ecosystem, and obviously the HyperEVM ecosystem as well, for reasons we can definitely get into, but it seems like it's poised to be a big one, definitely big ecosystem.
Yeah. We got into Hyperliquid just a couple days after it launched. We actually
the day no, the literal minute the token launched, like within a minute or two.
And he likes to be very
3
precise.
minutes maximum 3 minutes.
Dude,
I was in Hong Kong at the airport smashing by. Like, of course I remember this. And then it freaking 40x'd.
We were invited to join the Hyperliquid protocol back all the way in 2023. I think we even talked about a partnership with them, and we let that one slip through the cracks, unfortunately. So we're very committed to the minute that we bought Hyperliquid on the day that it launched. And so you guys are also quite bullish on HyperEVM, on Hyperliquid. Why did it stick out to you? Why Hyperliquid? In all the craziness of the perp space, how does HyperEVM help accomplish Summer.fi's goals?
Maybe I can step in just very briefly. I think so. Maybe if we take one step back and we look at the Ethereum ecosystem, and we look at specifically the yield ecosystem and the DeFi ecosystem within Ethereum, one sort of somewhat negative externality of having so much growth is the underlying fragmentation. I've seen this like map of something that you guys have put out around, just yield bearing stables. Like there's SUSDS, there's SUSDE, there's all of these different yield bearing stables, and from a customer point of view or a user point of view or even an institutional point of view, you have these decisions of like, well, which one do I use? What's the difference between this one versus that one? And those are just yield bearing stables, not even talking about different vaults and things like that. So that's the Ethereum ecosystem, the DeFi ecosystem within Ethereum. We feel that, similar to the Ethereum ecosystem, the Hyper launch, as you say, was incredibly fair. Probably the most fair since the Ethereum sort of sale. And given that there's so much community, like organic community love within the Hyper ecosystem, we feel that it will probably be a very similar trajectory with respect to the burgeoning DeFi ecosystem and the yield strategies and the yield ecosystem that comes with that. And there's going to be a lot of fragmentation. We already are seeing it within the Hyper ecosystem, and that's where Lazy Summer and the Lazy Summer protocol and the product that we have, we think, is a perfect fit. Because with one simple deposit, you're getting the sort of best risk-adjusted yield across the entire ecosystem. You're getting risk management and risk curation out of the box from Block Analytica, which also has the Maker connection. Probably one of the most trusted and most most trusted risk managers and risk curators in the DeFi ecosystem. So I'd say that's why we're quite bullish on the Hyper ecosystem and want to grow with it, basically.
Love it. So guys, what actually shipped today with Lazy Summer on HyperEVM, and what can users do now that they couldn't do before? Talk to us about the product launch here.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll take. So we launched two new vaults on Lazy Summer. So we've launched a USDC vault and a USDT vault on there. And what effectively the Lazy Summer protocol does, as kind of Jordan alluded to there, is users deposit just simple USDC or USDT, depending on what vault they want, and it will then automatically allocate to the supported kind of like protocols and markets under the hood, and rebalance to the highest yielding markets at any one time. So from a user providing liquidity to any of these markets on the HyperEVM, they always want to be earning the best yield they can possibly earn. And a lot of the time they want to obviously be doing their own risk management and so on. So we're just making it a lot more simple for anyone on HyperEVM or on other chains that want to be able to get exposure to HyperEVM, but haven't dived into like the complexities of where they should be putting their money, where's the safest thing, what are the different types of collateral backing these things. Here they can trust that they've got like a world leading risk manager in Block Analytica doing the risk assessments, doing the kind of risk caps and so on. Within the Lazy Vaults, it will never just throw kind of 100% of your capital into one market just because it's yielding the highest amounts. The risk manager sets the various different caps and so on. So if you want to just earn in the easiest way possible, like the best risk-adjusted yield on the market on HyperEVM today, now you've got the choice of both USDC and USDT. There's only a handful of markets been added today for the kind of the rollout of the kind of safety first and so on. But then over the next few weeks, more and more markets are going to get added. Even as early as next week, actually, there's a couple of markets that haven't got risk caps set yet. They're about to come online, probably as early as Monday. But yeah, from a user point of view, it was always self-management up until now, picking a variety of different morpho markets or whatever, different protocols like Felix and so on. Now they can just go and deposit in one place and know they're going to earn the best yield and so on.
You know, for so long, just real quick, Andy, for so long, there was, chain abstraction, which you guys are participating in, helping people find yield on different chains and kind of manage, where they're getting it from, making it really easy. You guys are also kind of taking this a step further. I would call this yield abstraction, where you don't really need to know where the yield source is coming from in particular. You guys are abstracting this away. You have a risk manager that's coming in and doing a lot of this management and risk management for you guys, and you're passing on that yield. And so it's abstracting, the complexities of the yield itself, not just the chain, but also the yield source. Andy?
I mean, my thought kind of on that exact point is just then the question of like, with this aggregation thesis, how does Lazy Summer decide where capital goes across Hyperland, Felix, Hyper.fi, Hyperbeat? How do you kind of allocate capital in a fashion without just chasing APYs, chasing yield, and paying fees for vaults and different types of smart contract risks? Obviously, we talked about Block Analytica. How does the Lazy Summer application or product allocate its resources?
Yeah, so we've got a set of like kind of AI powered kind of automated keepers that do the rebalancing. So they will ultimately seek the highest possible yield. All of the vaults that have been launched are effectively kind of like yield seeking vaults and so on. So they will look for the highest yield possible. However, they will also take into account things like the available liquidity on the underlying markets, as well as, like I said, the risk caps and so on. So there are markets, for example, that will never be allowed to take more than 30% of the vault's TVL as capital. So it may be offering the highest APY. Maybe it's triple the next level's APY, But if there's say like $10 million in the vault, it will never be able to give it more than 3 million. But the keepers will also take into account then how much available liquidity is actually in there, making sure it isn't taking all of the available liquidity or being the only available liquidity in the vault. So if there is starting to be kind of like something happening, or the keepers can detect kind of like abnormal conditions within the vault and so on, it will also start to remove capital from those markets in there. It also looks and it's designed to look for kind of like lender concentration and borrower concentration as well. So if there's only 1 or 2 borrowers, then that's kind of a red flag, and it won't chase that and so on. Or if one borrower represents like 90% of the capital and so on. So it very much is a kind of like risk first approach, but chasing the highest possible yields in ultimately the safest way and the easiest way as well.
And will you guys support USDH, or is that not part of the plan currently?
Yeah, so for us, I think it's yeah, definitely. Both USDH as well as Hype are certainly within the plans. We just want to roll out with sort of, it feels like USDT is kind of at least within the yield ecosystem on Hyper is kind of the most popular. Also, of course, USDC, but as we get more familiar, we're going to be rolling out certainly USDH when the yield sort of ecosystem is a little bit more robust. It was not as robust as we'd like it to be, probably to propose a vault in and of itself. And then of course Hype as well. The native asset, we stick to the highest quality assets and the highest quality yield sources on Lazy Summer. That has always sort of been our brand, is highest quality first, especially coming from the Maker protocol, or Sky, I guess now. And for us, when we're in the Ethereum ecosystem, is USDC, USDT, and ETH. That's it. And within the Hype ecosystem, we feel USDT, USDC, USDH, and Hype. So certainly, definitely in the plans.
And so you alluded to Maker as one of the primary sources of yield off of Hype, the HyperEVM ecosystem. They do great work. You guys came out of that ecosystem. They've been so instrumental in the success of DeFi across all of the blockchain. And so what are some of the other venues that you guys see like some really solid yield coming from that has been sustainable in the Ethereum landscape?
I think Morpho has been like one of the standout ones, and actually Morpho is almost like the standout example of what the value is in Lazy Summer as well, because he talked about kind of like chain aggregation and then kind of like protocol aggregation and so on. But then you look at the likes of like Morpho and Euler in particular that have this curator model. There's like maybe 40, 50, 60 markets for USDC on Euler and so on as well at the moment. So it kind of keeps going down to then kind of almost aggregate the different markets within certain protocols and so on. But very like it's pretty regular that when like Jordan, for example, every month will produces like a kind of a rebalance report, so where capital has gone kind of and moved throughout the month, and Morpho is always up there. Obviously a lot of the markets are being incentivized with the Morpho token. It's obviously doing incredibly well as well. That always helps with the yield, but obviously Morpho's found solid product market fit on almost every chain it's on. Obviously Morpho's also on HyperEVM as well. And I think kind of like that product market fit is a kind of really important point and kind of test of time a little bit as well. And another reason I think why like we're big fans of HyperEVM, Hyperliquid, and so on is because it actually has genuine product market fit compared to most L2 chains. There's only a handful out there I think that actually have solid product market fit. Same as tokens as well. There's only a handful of tokens that really have like kind of organic growth, real product market fit, and they're the ones that are supported on Summer.fi. Same with the chains, same as the protocols. We're not chasing the highest yield for any protocol. It has to kind of be a tier one protocol and so on. Because like kind of almost the mantra is really, it's like kind of first rule of anything on Summer.fi is you don't lose money. like that's the rule one, and so on. And then if we can make the users more money, basically by offering them the tools here that saves them time, makes them more, and gives them better exposure, then that's kind of our job. But yeah, Morpho was one. Euler was huge before before like all the DeFi issues in November as well. Like they were always extremely competitive with the yields, again supported by the Euler token as well. But yeah, Fluid is up there. Like what's kind of sad is obviously like the likes of like the Maker or Sky savings right now, like Arbage or Compounds, like they're such proven, such battle tested protocols that the yields are generally always a little bit lower there now, and that's the safety and so on. But what's great is when you see on Summer is actually when there is market movements and so on, then more often than not, capital goes into those kind of safe, secure protocols because they suddenly offer the better rates because that's where people trust them and so on.
Yeah. One thing I would just add there very quickly is, every week new yield sources are being proposed into the Lazy Summer protocol, and they can be proposed by anybody. So of course we get a lot of kind of ridiculous proposals. Well, maybe they're not ridiculous ones, but we get a lot of proposals, and a lot of them get rejected by maybe the community, but especially so by the risk curator or risk manager, Block Analytica. And I think what's so special about that is, often, especially you guys, you're, I think, DeFi users, when we talk to users, we hear two things mainly. One is they use a TVL as a proxy for trust, and they use, their smart friends as a proxy for trust. And now with the Lazy Summer protocol, yield sources are being proposed all the time. You have people who it's literally their full-time job to be, very analytical, very deep on the technical weeds, as well as the sort of financial engineering weeds of these different yield sources. And they can make that sort of decision, and you can just always have access to the best stuff, regardless of the TVL per se, as that only one factor. And they can sort of do that underlying diligence, and you can just always have access to the best stuff in the best ecosystems all the time. So you can actually, spend your time doing like things that you actually probably want to do. Maybe just listening to podcasts like this.
Yeah, man. We've been like putting together this thesis. We've been thinking a lot about, where we think the space is headed, both coming from more of the Wall Street, finance, legacy banking side of things. And then also we've seen, enough in crypto without product market fit. It feels like it's time to, evolve that side as well. And that's how we came up with this idea of neo finance, this convergence point where both of these sides can meet. And one of the aspects of this thesis is not repeating some of the C DeFi, the centralized DeFi, BlockFi, like that whole, ended with a lot of people in jail. We don't want to repeat that, but we do like the ease. We like the idea of, a forgot password button where someone can, basically help us, recover our account. But we want, and so, centralized front ends are okay. Self-custody isn't for everyone, but it's important that DeFi is in the back end because that's how we can get higher, safe yields. And so, one of the things that came out of this thesis was the idea of exogenous yield. Basically, there's a lot of yield coins and DeFi protocols now. They're going out, they're issuing credit. Someone like a Maple or a Daylight. Daylight, for instance, is a real solar company. They're going out, they're giving credit to real revenue. They're creating real revenue. They're bringing it back to token holders. Another one is USD AI is maybe an even better example, extending credit to AI companies. AI companies pay interest, and USD AI, pays yield back to its token holders. And so I'm curious if you've thought at all about, kind of these industries that are popping up where we're able to extend credit and then bring exogenous yield back to token holders. Where and in general, where do you think is like the next frontier for bringing new yield to this industry?
Like, and then Spark announced something interesting either today or last night, I think, as well, right? The collaboration with Anchorage and then being able to offer those clients effectively being able to borrow against Bitcoin and then using that the Spark liquidity layer for that, which I think is fascinating. I think from our point of view, we're less thinking about where the yield comes from, but actually how people can provide capital into the various different markets to then allow other, like either large borrowers, either institutional borrowers or DeFi borrowers, depending on the integration. And again, this comes back down to the Lazy Summer protocol and being able to do what we kind of like call kind of self-managed or self-branded vaults, where kind of like your DeFi apps or your custodians or your kind of large financial institutions can actually go and deploy kind of like working with us, but to deploy their own vaults, get access to these different markets and actually build themselves a product for their own customers. So a self-branded product, whitelisted only to their customers and so on. But again, like you said, DeFi in the back end and kind of CeFi, traditional finance in some ways in the front end, just from the user experience point of view in a way. Like UX has always been kind of the downfall of crypto really, but also just in particular DeFi. And something like myself and Jordan have been working on ever since like 2018 to try and improve that. But yeah, trying to bring more capital on chain. And if there's more capital on chain that can then be borrowed, then we're going to start to see much bigger, different types of borrowers, different types of products as well, where if there actually is a much more liquidity on chain, because in reality, the liquidity for borrowing is quite restricted to just the major apps and stuff at the moment, the kind of makers, the Aves, Morphos at the moment, like Morpho's doing awesome work with Coinbase and the Coinbase borrowers and so on for with BTC and so on.
And that's a great example.
That.
Yeah, that's a great example, right? Of you know, an easy to use front end, and you guys make it easy as well. And you have, you know, all of these yield sources in the back end.
Yeah. And I mean, I like hugely grateful for the compliment of how easy it is, but compared to CeFi or like fintech in reality, it's still a long way to go. And I still think that the ultimate goal here is, and it kind of pains me to say the ultimate goal is like to have just DeFi in the back end of fintech and so on. Because I think in 2018 we had much bigger visions for like everyone being their own bank or whatever. But the harsh reality is like everyone will go for the simplest option that still provides the best returns.
Yeah.
DeFi can produce the best returns, but we need to like go to the masses. Like we're not going to onboard billions of people into a self-custodial wallet.
Yeah,
like
we totally agree.
Seed phrase.
We've given up on that vision as well.
It's a Trojan horse. Ultimately, maybe it's aspirational, but I do think it's a stepping stone to ultimately get to the aspirational vision that we've had, you know, going back almost a decade at this point. Jordan,
Guys,
you had, I think Jordan, you had something to add there.
Yeah. So just very quickly, the only thing I would say is I think very to put a bow on it, ETFs, right? We saw this sort of same thing happen with ETFs. I heard Chris is actually the first person I heard say this, but I've heard it been spouted around a lot recently from I think a guy at Bitwise and other people. And you know, credit, we've seen credit and bonds and other forms of credit be wrapped up in ETFs. And if we're going to see all of the different types of forms of credit and such and forms of yield come on chain, I think we can have a similar thing thinking about it in terms of vaults and things like that, and things like Lazy Summer basically are just going to be kind of similar to ETFs, at least in the sort of user experience. And that also goes back, if you want to do that yourself and on the Summer front end, you can do that. If you want to plug into a fintech app or something and get Summer through that, like the Lazy Summer protocol through that, you can do that. So it's really best of both worlds. And I think that we, in terms of what yield sources are coming on chain, if DeFi is really going to have it there or actually get to mass scale, we can expect all kinds of yield sources to come on chain. And that's why something like Lazy Summer is so important, because the credit market is the smart part of the market as it is right now. So how can we expect users to actually do that underwriting themselves? They need some type of layer to help with that, some type of abstraction layer, to go back to the beginning, to help with that. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective on that.
Yeah, and that's where like the analogy to the ETFs come in, right? It's very similar. These folks aren't trying to go buy Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain using some crazy DEX cross-chain swap thing in self-seed phrases, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Gentlemen, two choices, one moment. HyperEVM is now live on Lazy Summer. USDC, USDT vaults, and HyperEVM. Aggregated exposure across Felix, Hyperland, HyperFi, HyperBeep. Summer rewards, HyperEVM points. Hyperliquid is the place to be. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Best of luck on the big launch upcoming. I know you guys have a lot cooking.
Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Been great being here.
See you again soon, guys. See you next time. Cheers.
Bye.